Joining me now here on the Knicks Film School pregame show, a returning guest who has not been here in a while. In fact, the last time he was here, we were trying to trade him Julius Randle, and we may have to have that conversation again with the Randles played this year, although he is not in the market for a power forward, I don't think, at least. From the Timeline podcast, which covers the Phoenix Suns for the Blue Wire Podcast Network, good friend of the pod, Sam Cooper. Sam, happy belated Thanksgiving, and how are you, sir?
Happy Thanksgiving to you and all Knicks fans as well. Andrew, thanks for bringing me on. I have backed out a little bit on the Julius Randle trade sweepstakes. I have to be honest. A lot has changed with the Suns organization since the last time I was on, which I guess that was over a year ago. So we got a new owner. We got a new franchise power forward. We've got a new, in theory, third best player on our team who has played 3 games for us so far. And we'll see if he ever comes back. But yeah, a lot is different.
So that's actually where I wanted to start, is what's changed. So I actually looked this up. We had you on in September of 2022. So the last season had not happened yet. The Knicks had just ended the Donovan Mitchell sweepstakes without Donovan Mitchell. And our thought was like, the only way this is going to work this upcoming season is they trade Julius Randle. We had no idea he was going to regain all NBA form. We had no idea the playoffs are going to happen. And this weird relationship that Knicks fans have to their 2-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA player, where they, I don't want to say ham sandwich is the price that they're willing to get back, but it's not great at the moment as far as the vibes are concerned. And you actually went out on a limb as one of the content creators that was like, you know what? Like Julius Randle, despite the bad year he just had, like in the right situation with the right people around him, could absolutely be better. Little did we know that was going to be Jalen Brunson. And what the Suns did, instead of taking your advice, was change owners, and Robert Sarver is now no longer there. And they did go get a power forward, but they went and got Kevin Durant instead in one of the bigger blockbusters that I've ever seen, especially mid-season. So take us back, if you don't mind, to, I believe it was the Sunday before the trade deadline last year, where in the middle of the night, my time, we get the notification from Shams that Kevin Durant's been traded to the Phoenix Suns. What was your reaction?
I mean, Jesus Christ, like I couldn't believe it. I still can't believe it. He's now just currently, to contextualize it the proper way, he's averaging over 31 points per game this season. It's the most he's been scoring since, you got to go back to his MVP year. Like as a 25-year-old, that's how much Kevin Durant is currently scoring. So I think you go back, and this is why you don't listen to the random advice of podcasters sometimes, because the way it ended up is so much better than I could have imagined. And of course, with KD, the thing is that entire summer of 2022 was mired in the KD rumors for us. We didn't believe that DeAndre Ayton had the trade value. And I think that later was its own saga but that came out to be correct. So the question was just, are you willing to part with Mikal Bridges, who's now, as you know, in Brooklyn and is doing great, I would say, but not a franchise player exactly. And then Cam Johnson, a bit of a lesser piece, and every first round pick we still have from now till the end of time. So it was a lot to give up, but I was with it on day one. I'm still ecstatic about the fact that he's on our team. I'm completely understanding of the fact that we're all in and we have to win a championship in the next couple of years, or else what was it all for? But it's a fun place to be. It's a scary place to be in the NBA.
So knowing that those are the stakes, that it's championship or bust, so that way you can justify a trade like this. Like I was talking to someone from my favorite Clippers podcast, and they were telling me how, like, watching SGA and what's going on in OKC, and how that trade, while in the moment you understood it, you kind of need them to win something. Not like this one trip to the conference finals can't be all it was worth. So, like, what's the timeline? Which, ironically, that I didn't do that on purpose, but you're welcome. I'm asking you what the timeline is.
We
how
always
soon are expectations, like, how soon do you need this to happen?
The championship this year, next year, any year now. But you have to understand, you know, from the second that Devin Booker made the finals, he had kind of ascended. And a couple years now later, we're even seeing, I think Devin Booker's playing his best basketball ever. He's playing better than he was a couple years ago. But from the second he made it, the expectations were to win a championship, because once you have a player in that tier, in the prime of his career, either you go all for it, or sooner or later, one way or another, he's going to push his way out within a couple of seasons. And so, we continued on trying to build that same core around Booker, the core with Mikal Bridges and DeAndre Ayton and Chris Paul, and eventually fell apart because those guys just weren't good enough. So you had to find another way to maintain Devin Booker's superstardom in the market of Phoenix as long as you possibly can. And this was the best way they could figure out to do it. It's bold and risky in some ways, but you've got a new owner with a lot of cash flow coming in Matt Ishbia, and here we are. We'll see what happens.
See, I didn't ask the question correctly because it was, are they on Kevin Durant's timeline or are they on Devin Booker's timeline? And you went ahead and answered it the right way because I'm curious. And look, as Knicks fans, we have this weird thing going on where we love our team. We love hard on our team, and we'll die for Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett and Quentin Grimes and Jalen Brunson and maybe move out the way for Julius Randle. But we have a solid core that we are excited about, yet realistically, we understand the trade is going to eventually have to be made if you want to raise the ceiling of this team. And Devin Booker, former CAA client, is on the list. Now, I don't want to make this how can we trade for your favorite player? Yeah. But the Devin Booker timeline being the window, realistically, what's the thought as far as how long that timeline is? Is there any fear that if in 2 years this doesn't happen, there's going to be questions, or do you expect this guy's going to retire a member of the Phoenix Suns?
No, I think, you have to be a realist these days in the NBA. You never expect that a guy's just that it's going to be honky-dory for the next 15 years and a guy's just going to retire with your market necessarily. That being said, Book has accomplished almost everything one possibly could as a member of the Phoenix Suns. He's dragged a Phoenix Suns team to the finals. He's been, their scoring leader for however many years. He has their most 30-point games by a long shot in NBA history, just in terms of individual games. It was a record he got, I think, a couple years ago now, or a year and a half, and just keeps shooting up ascending those rankings. The only things left for him are to win a championship, which obviously Barkley tried and couldn't. Steve Nash tried and couldn't. Booker tried with Chris Paul and once and couldn't. He's got to win a championship with this franchise. And he's a couple more years away from being the all-time franchise scoring leader, which I anticipate he will get as well. Other than that, that's maybe all that motivates him and he wants to win. As a guy who just wants to win, I think he wants to be here. But I have obviously no problems anticipating Booker trade rumors right now or whatever, because it's just not in the back of my mind. What I'm thinking about right now is how can they win a championship? But at some point, in the far off future, look, even Damian Lillard eventually didn't last with the Portland Trailblazers his entire career. So you never know what can happen. You can't expect loyalty from these guys for 20 plus years.
Look, this, as it shouldn't be in the front of your mind when you have a team that traded for Kevin Durant a year ago, traded for Bradley Beal this summer, and is still one of the 10 favorites, I believe, maybe even the 5 favorites on all the gambling sites to win the title. I would hope 5 favorites. Now, I would hope we haven't slipped too much. Well, I consider it there's an 8 that I look at. I guess maybe it's closer to 6 that I look at, and the Suns are in there where it's yeah, of course they won the title. I'm not going to be surprised. And Phoenix is absolutely on that list. It's obviously Milwaukee. It's obviously Phoenix, Denver, the defending champs. I think I still have Golden State there just on pedigree, although that's starting to change with how the age of that team is starting to show itself. And I guess I got to start. Let's talk about the Western Conference a little bit. I'm starting to welcome other candidates into the conversation. The Lakers used to be in there, but do you as a Suns fan look at the 10-6 start this year and see the people around you are yes, you're tied with Denver at the moment, but then Dallas is 10-5 and OKC is 11-4 and Minnesota, the Knicks played them last week and they were just a bitch to try and score any points on. And they have a budding superstar in Anthony Edwards. And they have a solid identity in this rim protection with Rudy Gobert. Do you take Minnesota seriously? What's your impression of the landscape of the Western Conference so far?
You take all of them seriously insofar as they're going to be tough regular season opponents. They might even be a tough out in the playoffs. Most of these teams have fully healthy cores right now, and Phoenix doesn't. We're 10-6. We're on a 6-game winning streak in spite of the fact that Bradley Beal has only played 3 games this season. Our entire 6-game win streak right now has been with Bradley Beal out. Even Kevin Durant missed the last game. Granted, that was against Memphis, who have really struggled this year, but it was just Devin Booker propelling them to a 21-point victory in that one. If they ever get healthy, like that's the huge question for this team. We're going to be talking about it all year, but I'll bring it up again. If they ever do, the only team in the West that scares me are the Denver Nuggets. My focus is still entirely on the Denver Nuggets in the playoffs and how you get past the Denver Nuggets. Not to say these other teams aren't challenging. Dallas in particular, much better start than I anticipated from them. I think for a lot of people, they became a bit of an afterthought after the way their season crashed and burned last year. OKC, it's not their time yet. They're a fun young team. A lot of people will be talking about them. They'll make the playoffs. They might make the second round. It's not their time yet to go to the finals. That's just not how it works. They're on a completely different timeline. So we're in different places with all these teams, but Denver remains the big threat that everyone's eyes are on.
Which makes sense. The defending champ should be that way. I will say, because you mentioned the Suns 6-game winning streak, and I've sorted it by the last 6 games on NBA.com and their advanced stats page. The Thunder during their 6-game winning streak, a net rating of plus 21.9. So like the Suns are there at 11.6, which is like an outstanding net rating over a winning streak. And you just look at what the Thunder are up to. Now, I will say what I expected from Phoenix going into this year is showing itself during this winning streak. And like you said, one, that they aren't healthy, and that it's 128.5 points per 100 possessions, which, my goodness, the offensive ceiling of this team when they get healthy. Do you expect, like you made the Ayton trade over the summer, and then like Beal being the third option? I think it's arguably one of, if not the best third option in the NBA if he's healthy. I know other teams have gotten better, and Boston has an interesting roster, but this isn't that podcast. What is going to be the identity, you think, of how this team gets to a title? I know it's probably a complicated and broad question, but like, is it really just going to be like, no one's going to be able to outscore us? Is that going to be where you go with this?
Well, look, I think we've already seen that their defense can hold up. They're something like 18th in defensive rating right now, so not great. But Denver has proven to us just last year, and several other teams in NBA history have proven to us that now, especially in the modern era, you have an elite tier, like top tier offense. I'm talking 120 offensive rating or whatever. 15th defensive rating, be an average defensive team is all you really need. And I think that's kind of what they're thinking. Yusuf Nurkic is obviously who they brought back in that DeAndre Ayton trade. Got to give some credit to him because he's had some struggles with his finishing numbers. And of course, in a vacuum, I don't think he's a more talented player than Ayton. I don't think anyone ever argued that. But defensively, so far, he's held up. His backup, Drew Eubanks, has held up. There are definitely some things they could work at with respect to their perimeter defense, but dropping back, their rim protection is not bad. They're first in the NBA in blocks. They have all sorts of guys, top to bottom on the roster. Kevin Durant, Keita Bates-Diop, Nazir Little, who are pretty good in the weak side rim protection role. So they're racking up blocks. They're playing some versatile defensive coverage schemes. They've got guys who will come in and they'll switch out all 5 onto the perimeter. So they've got the concepts down. We need to see how it solidifies over a full season. But no doubt their identity is going to be an offense first team. And that's what's crazy about this too, is right now over their win streak, their starting lineup is they've decided to go all offense by putting both Grayson Allen and Eric Gordon out there on the wing spots as 2 shooters, along with Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Yusuf Nurkic. So Bradley Beal's not even out there. Their third player is still not out there. And yet that starting lineup, that version of an all offense lineup, has a 135 offensive rating over the past couple of weeks. Like, the offensive ceiling of this team is truly insane. And we just haven't even seen it yet. The big 3 haven't played together.
How does that change when Beal comes back? There's no like does Grayson Allen go to the bench? Does Eric Gordon go to the bench? Yeah,
I think probably Eric Gordon goes to the bench. He feels a little bit more like a guy who comes off and throws up his heat checks off the bench. And Grayson, just a little bit bigger, can guard up better. I think there's still opportunities for other guys to start in that 5th spot too. And Vogel has been very open about how they're going to experiment with their starting lineup, and they've already done it. Keita Bates-Diop, as a much longer guy, he's got a 7'3" wingspan. As long as he can hit the open threes, he could be that 5th guy. Josh Okogie has had struggles shooting, but he's been in and out as that 5th guy because he's arguably their best perimeter defender just at the point of attack. So they're working through their options, but they've got better wing depth this season than last season when they were playing Landry Shamet heavy minutes in the playoffs. That's for sure.
Now, to your point about that 5-man unit that has an insane offensive rating over that stretch, if you just go to Cleaning the Glass and sort by 5-man lineups that have played at least 100 possessions, they have the 5th best in the NBA. Mm-hmm. So that's the Devin Booker, and Gordon, Grayson, Allen, Nurkic, and Durant lineup. And
that the crazy thing, though, I don't know if you have it in front of you, but that defensive rating, that defensive rating is probably like, what, 115, 120? It's not good. It's not good.
Yeah, but they're 9th percentile. Yeah,
but their offense is so good that they're still up there in the top of net ratings. So
97th percentile, like you said, 136 points per 100 possessions to 110. Yeah. Now, look, we can't all be the Celtics and have a 97 defensive rating when you also have a 125 offensive rating to create your an unreal net rating. Having said all of this, I remain not skeptical, but curious to see, will the injury bug, I mean, just to be completely honest, like I've this kind of leans in from my days of rooting against Kevin Durant on the Brooklyn Nets, that it was like, I want to see him play a full season before I actually decide he can lead a team to a title. Now, I wonder if you had any of those reservations on the day of the trade, and like, does it matter if he plays? Like, does it only matter about? Well, no, just like if he only plays 35 games again, or like plays a 40-game season.
I mean, that's like, my worry.
We're only carrying about the last 3 actual months of the season.
Yeah, I think I said before this season I'd like all 3 guys, I think, on our podcast to play over 60. I don't think Brad's going to get there because he's going to miss a couple more weeks, and there are many examples of players really only missing a few weeks with these types of back injuries, which can be tricky. And then they come back and they work it out. This is the first back injury Beal has ever had in his career. There are many positive outcomes, but everyone always thinks of the couple negative outcomes too, which are the catastrophic Ben Simmons out for a year and a half type, whatever. So we hope it's not that, because if Beal can't eventually come back and have a somewhat healthy season, and more importantly, a healthy playoff run, then, I think our chances are more or less cooked. But if all 3 guys can hit 50 to 60 plus games, I think as long as this team always puts 2 of their stars on the floor, so that A, you can kind of stagger them a little bit, and B, in your best lineups, your opening lineups and closing lineups, you can have 2 guys who attract great attention, like multiple defenders to the ball, they'll be fine. It's once you have the games where KD has to carry an entire mediocre offense by himself, or Booker has to do it by himself, where obviously the strategy to beat the Suns at that point becomes pretty easy. You trap on the perimeter, or you double in the post. If it's KD, you send multiple guys to the ball all the time, and the role players can't necessarily beat you. You need to have at least 2 of the 3 puzzle pieces, like, to win most games. And then if they ever get all 3 on the floor at the same time, I think that's where we're talking peak dangerous.
Yeah. And that was always, again, that was literally the case in Brooklyn, where I was skeptical about it from an availability standpoint, but when I saw it, my goodness, like we joke about the Nets and how they didn't win anything. Yeah, they're a shoe size or an ankle injury to Kyrie, or Harden's hamstring away from getting to the potentially winning a title during that season, and obviously everything else that happened off the court.
Right. And with the Nets, like, there's ways in which I don't mind people comparing us to them, and then there are ways in which I do. If you have questions about the Suns' availability, their injuries, I'm entirely for it. Any reasonable, rational person would have questions about this team's health going forward. The one thing I didn't like about some of the comparisons to the Brooklyn Nets that I heard in the summer is the kind of, there's only one ball, there's 3 guys, how are they going to do it? To where, Bradley Beal is not James Harden. Devin Booker is not Kyrie Irving. The way that these 2 guys have played traditionally in their career off the ball, and Kevin Durant, even, like, just as a very selfless superstar, the way that he played in Golden State.
I was going to say, we saw a good 3-year stretch where he made a 73-win team unbeatable with a lot of possessions, just using ball movement and off-ball movement, off-ball possessions,
If these 3 guys ever finally play together, I am so sure in my heart and my mind they are sacrificial in the way they play. There's no worries of, like, who's going to handle the ball at all times with these 3. It's just they need to get healthy, and we'll see if it happens. And if you don't think it's ever going to happen, I can't say I entirely blame you.
I'm not even there. I don't think it's gonna ever happen. I just I'm open to seeing it before I predict it. You know, I don't think I'll just be transparent. I didn't have them in my finals and in the preseason predictions. I think I had them as my 2 seed, either my 2 or my 3 seed, and I believe it was I had them my 2 seed. It was Denver 1 and then Phoenix 2. And I think I even in the conversation of talking it out, it's I don't trust the Lakers' health. And I think the Clippers could get better, and Golden State, there's an age thing, but I do think there'll be a gap between 1 and 2, because I think for a lot of these teams and with some of the older stars, what's going to matter is March and April and that ramp up. And who knows what this in-season tournament actually does. So how do you feel about this tournament, by the way? Does it
I love it.
Added? So has it added? Are you actually in tune to the standings? And
I'm in.
You got to win our group. Okay.
Are you not in it? The Knicks are you guys are likely to make it. I think I saw you're in the wild card spot, right?
Last night got us in it. I will say this win against Miami was huge because it was an in-season tournament matchup that now gives us the tiebreaker on Miami. The problem is we lost to Milwaukee. So we need Miami to beat Milwaukee next week. And then we have to beat Charlotte by at least 30 something points.
Oh, okay.
The point differential's the thing. Tough. But if you go 3-1 in your bracket, you have a legit shot, is my point.
So what's happening with us, I don't know if you saw this, but we went 3-1. We won our game last night, and Devin Booker made a 3 in the closing seconds of a game that was already an 18-point lead. He brought it up to a 21-point lead to give himself 40 points on the night. Any other night, that's considered stat padding. It's against the unwritten rules of the NBA. But in this particular game, what it did is it gave the Suns a plus 34 differential, just beating out, I think it's the Pelicans with a plus 33 differential to likely secure us that wild card spot to advance in the tournament. The only way we don't get it is if a couple teams blow out their opponents by, I forget who, maybe the Warriors is one of them, blow out their opponents by 35 in their next game. It's fun. It's the NBA foresaw these types of events happening, but the players who are hyper competitive already clearly care about it. I'm not going to pretend that I was always 100% on board with it. When the news was announced, I was kind of why should I give a crap about this? They should be cutting me dividend checks in order to make me care or whatever. But now that we're actually here, it's a fun tournament. Obviously, I hope they go all the way. And I'm into it, dude. I'm into it.
I think if the Knicks make it to Vegas and there's a tournament playoff game in the middle of December, or at least the beginning of December, that I have to get up for, that's when I'll be like, oh my gosh, this matters. This means something. Look, coming back against the Miami Heat in a playoff situation will always be something I enjoy, especially after the Knicks were eliminated by the Heat last year in the regular playoffs. So I guess we'll see what happens. Couple questions before I let you get out of here. This is year 1 of a new head coach with Frank Vogel, and obviously he won a title, but also, I haven't talked to a Laker fan about whether he was scapegoated or not at what happened at the end in LA, but it did seem like he wasn't the main reason. It seemed like they made a trade for a player that didn't fit, and then it wasn't until they then traded that player the following season that roster was able to breathe and find its correct fit. And now Frank Vogel finds himself in Phoenix. What have your impressions of him been so far? In fact, we can go back even further. When the hire was made, were you on board? And then obviously what's it been like through the first 16 games?
Yeah, I was on board. I was willing to open myself up to other possibilities, though I didn't necessarily feel that you need a coach with a championship pedigree. They'll bring the guys out to the podium and they'll talk your ear off about championship experience and all that. I didn't feel that was a necessity in who the Suns ultimately hired. I like Frank so far. I like particularly his willingness to experiment with the rotations, and he's given us a lot of different looks. Again, he was very open about that in the training camp process of he felt that James Jones did a good job this year of making the most of their very limited cap space. In fact, they basically only had minimum contracts to work with, but tried to stack the roster with as much depth as he possibly could. And now it's Frank's job to turn that into a working product. And I think he's already done a good job of identifying some pieces that can fit together nicely. He's been quite good with his decision making when it comes to using a challenge. There was a game the other week against an opponent that's escaping me, but the Suns secured a win with a final second challenge from Frank Vogel that he had saved up to that point. Just the
Utah game. The Utah game.
Thank you. It was the second
3. Yeah.
It was the second Utah game. So just little moments like that have been good so far. I know, look, I've had the conversations with Lakers fans, and I know if you go back go back and talk to Lakers fans, there are many who were less than pleased with his kind of X's and O's execution. I struggle to really make a grand statement on that at this point until, again, we finally see Bradley Beal in the lineup at least a little bit, because so far it kind of feels like they've had to do a little improvisation. The guys who are playing together right now are ideally not the guys who will be playing together heavily in the playoffs once we ultimately get there. But yeah, I'm satisfied with Frank's job so far.
Yeah, we're in year 5 of the Tibbs experience, and like I'm satisfied. There are still things about him that drive me crazy, but this team and really this front office has decided to lean in on roster building around the things he's good at, and they have an identity, and it's playing hard for 48 minutes. Although I think this can lead into the Knicks game conversation. There is an accountability thing with the 2-time All-NBA player that seems off, but you know, the fact that this team's able to still keep fighting no matter what the deficit is, and you know how disciplined they can be even against like a tough team against the Miami Heat is always going to be a plus. Now, I am very curious what your thoughts about the New York Knicks are, because this is usually the portion of the program where I hand the pod over to my guest and say, like, what's your Knicks question? What's your Knicks thoughts on where they are at the moment? So Sam, the floor is yours. What do you got?
I mean, so first of all, this matchup, and I will be at the game tomorrow, by the way. I'm currently potting, which I'm very excited about. I'm potting here from my parents' basement in Westchester because I was just visiting home for the holiday. And I'm very excited to go to the game. I will say every time I'm back in New York, even for a couple of days at a time, the prices are like culture shock. And going to a Knicks game, I'm going to be way up there with the tickets. And it was like for the same price as like a decent seat in Phoenix, right? Yeah, for sure. And just kind of any other. Well, any arena. That's like the best part market. When you go through the schedule and it's like a full slate, and it's like $12 in Detroit, $16 in Atlanta, $8 in Charlotte, $83 for nosebleeds, right? In like New Yorker for the worst possible, for standing room only. If you wanted to watch on the outside scoreboard, it's $212. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's the Garden. But the Garden is a great place to be. I am stoked to be there, so I'm really excited. And just this matchup tomorrow excites me because I think the Knicks have won 7 of their last 9. Suns 6-game win streak. I think they're 7th and 8th in net rating going into this game in some order. I don't remember who's on top. You guys might be on top. Actually, I looked at this earlier, but I forgot. 7th and 8th. Knicks are 7th, Suns are 8th, but it's like, look, they're close. It's 4.6 and 4.2. KD didn't play on Friday against Memphis. We haven't had any update on that yet. I think they were just resting him for a really quick foot issue, and he should be back. I am anticipating an awesome matchup here and a challenging one. So first of all, that's fun. As for questions about the Knicks, there's all sorts of stuff that goes through my head because kind of I've always felt that like these days, if you're on the internet in 2023, the social media experience of fandom is a wild ride for anyone. But if you're a Knicks fan, if you're a Lakers fan, if you're like a fan of a couple particular fan bases, it's just like to the max, like 500% worse than whatever the rest of us are experiencing. Where are we? Are we all back on board 100%? The RJ Barrett experience this year, like what's the, Julius Randle, I feel like hasn't really been forgiven by a lot of Knicks fans ever from the first time he tanked and then came back a little bit last year. And now it's gone to shit again. And so what's interesting about your guys' team is there have been enough of these players now and enough continuity who have been there for a while where we've seen them kind of go through the circular arcs multiple times of everyone's on board, everyone's not on board. But yeah, so like, where are we? RJ Barrett's the real guy who I'm curious about with what the fan base is thinking right now. So they actually tie into each other, both RJ and Julius, because and I'll get psychological here with the fan base. And this is not everybody, but this is my read on the majority of the situation. So with RJ, even at his worst, there was in the back of everyone's mind, from what I can tell, like, man, if he ever figures it out, I want to root for him. Like, I'm going to live with these struggles. It's objectively bad right now. Like last season was awful. And then the playoffs happened and it was like every emotion we wanted to feel for RJ in the positive direction. Now we can feel it. And he's carried it over into this season. And it's been a jubilation. Like we finally get to feel how we've always wanted to feel about RJ Barrett and apply those exact same emotions, but in reverse to Julius Randle, where it's like
He got here as the consolation prize to a Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Zion Williamson sweepstakes that they lost. And then we always wanted him like here for a little bit and then traded. Then the We Here season, he legitimately built like a lot of goodwill with his fan base. But then the playoffs happened and it was like, all right. So now we don't know if you're a playoff player. Then that season that you're talking about happened and we were ready to ship him out for a ham sandwich. And then last year, he makes All-NBA and was legitimately outstanding for about 75 games. Gets hurt, and then in the playoffs, those warts started to creep in again. Who knows how hurt he was, but like every emotion everybody wanted to feel all year while he was hitting all these tough threes and hitting all these long twos and putting up 40 on these teams that are with legitimate defenses. And it was like, all right, I can't feel how I want to feel about Julius. And this season, the start he's gotten off to, now I can feel about Julius Randle how I've always wanted to feel about him.
It's so tough with him because I feel like I'm not sure. You mentioned he's a 2-time All-Star with the Knicks or just in general, but I'm not sure.
With the Knicks, it's all happened here. What he has become, taking his career to this level. You know?
I don't know that there's ever been a more complicated. I can't think of a more complicated relationship that a franchise has to their 2-time All-Star, and it kind of feels like the package of talent or tools is all there, but it's like when you have like a show, like a long running TV show that's like taken over by multiple showrunners or writers. And like this one writer is for this season, it was just really shit. And like, it's just the twists and turns and weaves we've had all confined within the same player's body and talent. With Julius is like nothing I've ever seen. And the fact that you've kind of speed run that process over the past 3 or 4 years. I was into it last year. I was happy to come on your pod and talk with you and Macri about it, but I don't know that I could do it at this point. I don't know that I could have him raising my blood pressure on a nightly basis to that extent anymore. He's a complicated guy.
I think the even better comp is like it's a quarterback that you know you can win 10, 11 games with. But you know for a fact you're not getting to a conference title. Like if the reason that you got to the playoffs or you won your 11 games, like Derek Carr would honestly be like the best comp because like the Raiders clearly had like a 9-10 win season, even made the playoffs once. And they were like, yeah, we're good because we know what the ceiling on this is. And I think Julius has absolutely been better in the NBA than Derek Carr has been in the NFL. But the point being, the fan base's relationship is like, we know this ceiling. And like even crazier, Sam, this isn't good stats, bad team guy. The Knicks have won with Julius Randle as a focal point in the offense. This isn't a play-in team. This team made the second round last year and upset the Cavaliers. Like he is a part of the success that this team has had. But we all recognize the thing that needs to be upgraded the most is that spot. And we don't know if you can upgrade it. And I'm like someone that's always low key been in the Randle hive because that We Here season means so much to me. And I recognize it. Like I'm not going to go out and boo him in front of his children, but I also recognize like you need to hustle back on defense, my friend. So I don't know. Like you said, it's a very complicated relationship where you can't call him unsuccessful, but the franchise, the fan base is so ready for like anything else. Just sorry for anything else, you know?
I mean, you know, you guys are restless, obviously, as you have the right to be, but you look upwards at the top teams in the Eastern Conference and you want nothing more to be in that conversation with the Knicks and Bucks. And I don't know if you'd put the fucking Magic there at this point, but sorry, by the way, if I should not be cursing on this podcast.
Literally say whatever you want. You're good. The funny thing about the Magic and their start is like they're. I have no idea how seriously I could take them. It's similar to your thoughts about the Thunder.
They're fun.
And they're fun. Like you want it to last as long as possible, and then we'll see what happens come playoff time.
They'll be a real threat in 2 years. You don't have to worry about them.
Exactly. So, Sam, you've been good. Oh, I didn't even ask you the question I've been asking literally everyone. You got 3 more minutes.
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. So I've been asking every single pregame pod guest their Mount Rushmore of rivals. So like the Knicks fans, we have these dates that we circle on the calendar when the schedule is released, right? And like last night was one of them with the Miami Heat. So for Suns fans, who would you say are the 4 teams that like schedule comes out? Okay, these are the ones I'm circling on the calendar.
Yeah, well, based on like historical precedent or just kind of where the vibes are right now. Like, I'm
how about both?
Okay, historically, I grew up during the 7 seconds era. That's why I'm a Suns fan, despite the fact that I grew up in New York. And we'll always hate the Spurs. Actually, ironically, though, kind of root for the Spurs now because I really am interested in the career of Wemby. And, I didn't even necessarily mind when they beat us twice early in the year. It was kind of fun to watch him kick our ass and score 38 in that game.
Okay.
I still always root against the Spurs, but so you do circle those games just for historical precedent. But the teams that we're most interested in beating right now, Lakers, always, just because, again, that history. Denver. There's this history building with Denver. And it's funny because if you ask a Denver fan what they think about Phoenix right now, they're probably going to act like John Hamm and Mad Men or whatever. Like
we don't about you at all.
We don't think about them at all or whatever, which they have the right to say right now. But it was not that long ago that Jamal Murray was injured in a playoff series and the Suns swept Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. Jamal Murray is out again right now. And lo and behold, the Denver Nuggets are struggling. So, of course, that's the team out of a respect factor, not even because I hate their guts, but we know we're going to have to get past them eventually. So you should be glued to your screen for any Phoenix Suns Denver Nuggets matchup this year. In terms of Eastern teams, I feel like we always have good games against the Boston Celtics too, but they only happen twice a year. So I'm really looking forward to when we finally play them, just because that's one of those other teams where it's like, if we're going to get there, we're going to have to work our way through that multifaceted and versatile defense that they have, and that will just be basketball porn. So
what about the Bucks, since they played each other a couple of years ago?
Yeah. So what's funny is there's that rivalry with the Bucks too, but the Bucks are a different team now. If you ask me my feelings about Drew Holiday, I have very intense feelings about Drew Holiday because like he's the one he wrapped up and got the block on Book like in the closing minutes of Game 6 so that we couldn't extend that game, right? Like had a very integral moment to that series. Damian Lillard is not Drew Holiday on defense. I would anticipate that he's going to have those same sorts of minutes. Giannis, I think Suns fans mostly, like, interestingly enough, I think we mostly just respect Giannis. There's no like, we hate Giannis Antetokounmpo. Like, sure, like denied us a championship, but didn't play a dirty series. Got a lot of free throws, obviously, because there's nothing you can necessarily do to stop him in that kind of situation. But yeah, we're looking forward to the games against the Bucks too. But I feel like the Celtics are a little bit just more dangerous in the East right now, and until the Bucks can prove me wrong on that point.
Look, like you said, they have Drew Holiday, so maybe that's the player that you actually are looking
and also
competing against the most.
Maybe I listen to too much Bill Simmons, but like there have been, Jason Tatum, Devin Booker
thing. Okay,
there have been Jason Tatum, Devin Booker comparisons out there for years. It's just one of those things. You want to see those two guys go head to head in a series.
Brother, you do not have to tell me reasons to hate Boston. You're in the right place when it comes to finding a reason to find something wrong with Boston. The only other team I'm surprised between like the Chris Paul of it all and the Durant relationship is Golden State.
That's fun. I mean, Golden State, so we've beaten them twice now this year. I don't view them, to be entirely honest, in the inner ring of contenders. I think they're in the outer ring of contenders. They're going to be challenging. It would be a hard-fought playoff series, and there's a ton of history and unique angles when those two teams play each other. But they're not like one of the opponents that strikes fear in my heart, particularly right now. If I'm being honest, they're just a little bit too past their peak. Steph is Steph. But Chris Paul, I think he's having a solid season for them, but it was tough. It was time for Chris Paul to leave the Suns.
There's a hint of Dwayne Wade on the Cavs with Chris Paul right now, where it's like very clear, or maybe when Wade went back to Miami for that last stint, where he's clearly past his prime. He's finding a new role and a new identity of where he is in his career, and you hope, for his sake, I'm sure you feel this as a Suns fan, that like a title happens, but not at the expense of my team. And, just so that his career doesn't get picked apart the way that we do with guys that don't win a title. But we'll see. I have nothing against the Suns. As someone of the fan of a team that has not won a title in a while, I said this to
certainly not while you were alive.
Not while I was alive. That's for sure. That's for sure. I'll tell you that much. I barely see them make the finals since I've been alive. I respect and understand the frustration of like near misses, and like you became an actual Suns fan during the 7 seconds or less era. I was rooting for the Suns in all of those matchups because they were fun, and I loved Amari, and I loved Joe Johnson, and I loved Barbosa, and all those teams. So I wouldn't be upset if the Suns won the title this year, but again, not at the expense of my team. So we'll start.
No, I get it. We'll
start on Sunday night and see, how this matchup turns out. Sam, thank you so much for giving me your time, especially on a holiday weekend. Before you get out of here, tell the fine folks at home where they can find you and all your stuff.
Yeah, you can find me, it says right here on the screen, but at @SCooperHoops, or Scooper Hoops is my Twitter profile. So follow me there, Suns Analysis, and you can listen to our podcast. It's called The Timeline, a Phoenix Suns podcast, a fellow Blue Wire podcast. That you can find us on any streaming platform. If you're ever interested in kind of tapping into a little bit of Suns news, that's where we are.
There you go.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
Absolutely, Sam. Thank you.